Hello? Hey. It went hot and then went away. Okay. Okay, good. Well, I don't hear myself, so I'm trying. Well, I'm nowhere near the microphone, so I have no idea. Well, I guess I'm somewhat close to it. I don't know. I think I'm good enough, but I can I can hear myself over the phone. Oh, wait a minute. I'm not going to hear myself whenever I'm talking through this thing. Let's see. I'm going to use your. Um, oh, actually, I see it on the other screen. Yeah, so I guess it is working. That's what you hear now. Yeah. Okay. All right, bye.
She's on her way.
Who's on the way?
The speaker.
Oh, I think we're okay right now. The only I can't tell what I'm listening to. I can't hear it. So
Get that other board. But we don't have an adapter still.
yeah.
Dang, we should have grabbed some from the church.
Um. Well, Gary can hear me right now, but
You don't know why?
I can't monitor it from right here. I think it's right now I need 3 computers back here to get the single one. Because if I plug the mixer into this one, it kills the internet because there's no internet going to the mixer. It's wired. And that one has to be wireless to get internet out for my stream. So that one's like just sitting up there.
Well, here in the next 15 minutes, just make sure these mics work.
Yeah. And that is number one priority.
Are you using this Crestron? Or are you going to do what we did
I
yesterday?
didn't really do extra.
So we know He knows VTC today too, right?
Gary? I have no idea. You should be back in a second here.
Really? On the streaming?
Yeah. Streaming works.
That's great.
So,
Are you ready for this?
because that mic's hot and it's working fine.
VTC, this too.
Not VTC webinar. I have time to do VTC like that out. 7 o'clock. Webinar ready to go.
So this is the one which you.
Now, if it's just Searle only, I think what room they were in, we probably do a direct connect. Be an option.
Did you advertise that on VTC?
I'm not. I'm about to send the email.
So, you have webinar?
Yeah, it's ready to go. Did you get the webinar info?
Yep. Jerry just sent it to me, right?
Yeah, okay, see, this folder.
And of course, we'll be live on Urban
Well,
TV.
we have a link. If we could get some feedback.
Of course, in the video, people.
Okay, so
Do you have this link?
Yeah, actually,
Ben just said, like he's getting the streams now. I never sent the link.
Please pass it.
If he's on that channel though, you're streaming on which channel? Erdic's channel or ITL's channel?
Brand new email address I just created.
Oh, really?
Minutes ago, yeah.
Send me a link and I'll test it from I'll go watch it from the office and see. Make sure it looks good.
For the webinar?
He's doing YouTube.
YouTube?
I hear it.
Okay.
It's working.
This is mainly for the Erdic Town Hall. Dr. Holland specifically requested YouTube or streaming over the web so that you can watch it from home.
We're good?
because I'm gonna put a mic on her, so we'll have to. When we adjust this, it's gonna adjust everything, isn't it?
Because you're coming through there. Just put your mic on. You sound all right.
Okay. Well, I'm just worried about feedback. I'm gonna mute it. Test. I'm gonna check on feedback. How we doing? Okay. Good. Good. Whoop, whoop. I check 1, 2. That's okay? Good? Okay. Check, check. Oh, there we go. Oh, Lord have mercy. Crank it down some, Roberto. Good to go? Good to go, good to go, good to go, good to go? Okay. Check, check, check. All right, we're good?
Welcome to AT&T's teleconference service. Please enter your access code, followed by the pound. To join the conference as a host, press star. Otherwise, please enter your host password, followed by the pound sign. Please enter the security code, followed by the pound sign. You entered 1, 2, 3, 4. To accept, press 1. Otherwise, press. At the tone, please speak your name. There are 1 participants on the call, including you. You are joining your conference as the host. For a menu of available commands, welcome to AT&T's teleconference. To join the conference as the host, please enter your host password, followed by. At the tone, please speak your name. There are 1 participants on the call, including you. You are joining your conference as the host. For a menu of available commands, press star pound.
Is it on? Good morning. It's not high enough. Okay. Good morning. That sound good? Okay. Good morning.
Or would you like to start down here and then walk up there? Or would you like to start with them? You have your choice.
Ready? I didn't do that. Good morning, everyone. My name is Randy Buchanan. I'm the ERDIC ACM Chapter Chair, and thank you for coming to listen to our very distinguished speaker this morning. This presentation is provided by our ERDIC ACM Professional Chapter, the Computational Science and Engineering Division, and the Information Technology Laboratory, as well as the ACM National Distinguished Speaker Program. Special thanks to Dr. Reed Mosier, Dr. Jerry Ballard, and many others for supporting this activity. Dr. Laura Haas is an IBM Fellow and Director of the IBM Research Accelerated Discovery Lab. She has served as Director of Computer Science at the IBM Almaden Research Center and has had worldwide responsibility for IBM Research's Exploratory Science Program. Previously, she was Senior Manager for Information Integration Solutions Architecture and Development in IBM Software Group. Dr. Haas was one of the founders of Information Integration Solutions, which today includes InfoSphere Information Server and a suite of products that can integrate both structured and unstructured data via federation and materialization. She received her PhD in computer science from the University of Texas at Austin in 1981. Dr. Haas will be speaking today on the topic of data analytics and the dawn of the cognitive era of computing. Dr. Haas, welcome.
February 2011 was sort of a watershed year. That year, that month, a computer program named Watson beat the world champions, two of them, at Jeopardy. Well, I would definitely know. Can you hear me now? Okay. All right. So, as I was saying, in February 2011, this little computer program named Watson beat the reigning world champions in Jeopardy. And Jeopardy is a pretty sophisticated game. There have been a lot of computers that have beaten a lot of people at games in the past, but it was all sort of search technology. All you did was kind of go through the game space and make use of the fact that the computers could compute better than humans. But now you're talking about a game that requires knowledge of language, a lot of basic knowledge of a lot of different facts, and in which a sense of humor actually really helps. None of these are things that computers were particularly known for. I was privileged to be at the taping of this show, and I can assure you that no one in that room, not me, not the two champions, not the team that had built the computer program, had any idea whether Watson could win or not. It had won some skirmish matches, it had lost some, who knew? But when it did, and when it did, it ushered in really the beginning of a new age of cognitive computing. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Start by thinking a little bit of the history of computing, very little, I promise. Back in the good old days, certainly before the world wars at the beginning of the 1900s, early 1900s, up till that time, we were in an era of tabulating systems, right? We had various things from the abacus up to calculators that would help you do some calculations and computing. Most of us were born into and have lived most of our lives in an era we would call the programmable systems era. So that's an era in which you could tell the computer what to do. One machine could do many different types of things. And over the course of this era, we've gone from assembly language, very basic instructions having to tell every last thing the computer had to do, to higher and higher level languages, levels of abstraction, to faster machines, to much smaller machines. I have more compute power on my cell phone than I used to have in my father's government-sponsored room full of computers back when I started learning to program. But now we're entering a very new era, an era that we'll call the cognitive systems era, in which computers will not have to be told what to do, at least not the way we've been telling them. Instead, they will be instructed or taught, and they will learn and get better as they keep doing whatever task they're meant to do. So why do we use this term cognitive? Why do we call it a cognitive system? We're basically doing an analogy, using an analogy to humans. So the human on the left, we're all very familiar with. We all have senses. We can perceive different sorts of things. We have a memory to remember what we've seen. We learn concepts over time. So from childhood on, we keep learning higher and higher concepts. We use logic, or at least some of us do, to solve problems, right? And we have what we call actuation. That is, we can act on the things we learn, either by speaking, by moving things, by wandering around in the world. We have different ways in which we can act on our environment. So when we talk about cognitive systems, we are in essence just making an analogy to what humans can do. And actually, I'm going to try this and see if this works a little better, because I'm used to being on this side of the thing. Okay, so the computer can perceive. It may not have the same 5 senses we do, but we're giving them senses that we'll never have, perhaps, like sonar, LiDAR, infrared technologies of all different kinds, sensors that pull in the temperature and so on. All of those are the senses of these computer systems. They've had memory for years. What's new in this cognitive era is they're starting to really be able to learn or be taught different concepts. Good at logic, they can apply that logic in ways that they have either been told to do or taught to do to solve problems. And they actually also have actuation. That is, they have the ability to act on information. It may be as simple an act as just sending a message, an alert of some sort, or it may be robotics and just actually moving an arm or something of that sort. But this is really, when we talk about cognitive, we're thinking about all this range of capabilities, and these are the different things that people are thinking are included in that. Now I want to pause there for a minute because there's been a lot in the popular press these days about computers taking over the world, and we see all these movies where science fiction sorts of things where maybe computers are going to replace humans. That is not really the belief, at least of my teams and the groups that I've been working with in the artificial intelligence community. There are some things that are uniquely and intrinsically human that we have no idea how to really give to a machine. Humans are self-directed. We figure out what we want to do and we do it. We don't really know how that comes about yet. We have no way of making that happen. Most of us have some amount of common sense, which is probably why I shouldn't be up here on this platform demonstrating lack of common sense, but we do. And that's not something that anybody has successfully given to a computer or really understands how to do. We have values and we make judgments based on those values. And again, those are very human sorts of capabilities. Now the machines are a lot better at us than some things. They're better at large-scale math. They can follow complex procedures without making flaws. They can reason over large volumes of data, much more than we can tend to absorb. So they make perfect partners for us. And together we're both very good, though in rather different ways, if you think about it, at pattern matching, at picking out patterns from data. So the way we're approaching this whole cognitive computing thing is, how do we make the most intelligent, most capable assistants we can for humans? How can we help people make better, faster decisions and be more competent and comfortable in the decisions that they're making? And so that's really the goal of a lot of the work that I will be talking about today. Any Star Trek Next Generation fans in the room? Any of you remember Lieutenant Commander Data? Very well named Lieutenant Commander Data. For those of you who've never seen the show, he's an android, so he's a cognitive system dressed in humanish form, right? But he's a really good example of what I'm talking about with the human and the machine working together, in that his job was to be one of the team who knew everything, had all the data, right? And then could help his teammates with their mission. And so that's really the model that I'd like you to have in your heads of these cognitive systems. They won't be as cute as Lieutenant Commander Data for quite a while. Okay, so here we are. Here's our history again of the computing eras. How are we getting from this programmable systems era to the cognitive systems era? Well, in fact, Star Trek got it right. It's all about the data. In fact, big data. I don't have to tell you all, because you work here, we are producing an enormous amount of data every day. 2.5 exabytes. So that's, I always get my things 10 to the 18th. Am I off by one? Anyway, somewhere like that. Bytes of data created every day from all different sources. For a long time, it was machine generated with the biggest sources of data. Nowadays, there's getting a run from their money from all of us who sit out there with our Facebook accounts and our Twitter feeds and so on, and keep producing more stuff. But it's all being captured digitally, and it's available. And so there's a lot of data that a machine can start to learn from. Another little factoid that's kind of cool is that 90% of the world's data was created in the last 2 years. They're saying that even if you restrict yourself to just what scientists produce, just the stuff that goes into the published literature, that's doubling every 9 years or so, the size of that literature. And we'll come back to that point because it's one in which we know as scientists we need help. A lot of data, and there's a lot of things you can do with that data. And in fact, Watson was a cognitive system and was data-driven in this sense, right? So the way Watson was able to answer questions, he was powered, or it was powered, we kept calling it he, which was very upsetting to us as computer scientists. You personify these programs very quickly. So Watson was powered by knowledge gleaned from about the equivalent of 1 million books, a lot of different sources over from the web, Wikipedia, but sports pages and tables of statistics and information about every Broadway show known to mankind, all the sort of trivia, if you will, that you need to know to be able to play a game like Jeopardy. And on top of that, though, it had a lot of very basic and advanced computer science. Question answering technologies, yes, the ability to take all that data and form it into knowledge network to represent it and reason about it. Of course, a lot of natural language processing, both to be able to understand the information it had gleaned, but also to produce answers to questions. And then it learned. And I think one of the most dramatic moments for me in that show, if you haven't watched them, they're out online, you can go and watch those playoffs. One category, you know, the various different dollar amounts in the category, we saw Watson go from not understanding at all what the answers were supposed to be to watching its teammates answer a couple correctly to being able to pick the right answer itself. And so you saw that real-time learning from experience. Very cool. high performance computing, of course, to crunch all that data and be able to make real-time responses. And of course, we were managing a lot of unstructured information. So it was not that much data, actually. 1 million books is a lot, but it's not that much. But a lot of computer science around it. Since then, we've gone on, of course, to bigger data sets, but also to more real-world sorts of problems. And so you'll see announcements or pronouncements from IBM talking about, for example, the work we're doing with Medtronic to try and control diabetes. Medtronic makes, try and get this right, glucose monitors and insulin pumps. But they collect a lot of data. They have something like 125 million patient days of information from patients who are using their monitors and pumps. They have anonymized all that data, and Watson is now trying to learn the patterns with them for what is the beginning of a hypoglycemic event? What are the warning signs that you can see in the biology in case the person forgets to tell you, as they must today, what they've been eating or what they're doing, right? So that you could do a much better job of monitoring and eventually reacting immediately so that the person who is afflicted with this disease does not have to be bound by it for their life. Other sorts of things we're doing, working with Sesame Street, who are experts in childhood learning, to try and give every child, regardless of their economic background or social environment, the advantages of a totally personalized education. Children under 5 years old learn incredibly quickly, and there's a lot of evidence that if you can reach to them and you can help them to learn in that phase, they will develop much richer capabilities than at any other point in the educational process. And so that it sets them up to succeed in life. Sesame Street, again, has a lot of information. They've done over 1,000 studies over 45 years on how children respond, what are the best ways for them to respond. We're now trying to add to that, again, the ability to process all that data, the ability to learn from that data, and then the ability to adjust to the individual child as you see how an individual child is moving. And so these are kinds of cool projects that are now within reach because we have pushed our abilities in natural language, our abilities with big data, and our machine learning capabilities to a certain level. But so that was by way of sort of preamble. What I really want to talk to you about today is where is all this technology going? And there are a lot of really hard problems in front of us that need to be solved. What I want to kind of do is give you a sense of what those challenges are. I'll talk about 3 or 4 projects in particular to just give you a little bit of a sense of the challenges of each one and show you where some of the opportunities for computer scientists are to really make a difference and an impact. So let's start with one that when I first heard from my colleagues that they wanted to try this, I thought was really going to be science fiction. I want to talk about, can we make the computer into a scientist? Can we have a cognitive assistant for a researcher, help the researcher make new discoveries faster than they can today? This is work we're doing jointly with folks at Baylor College of Medicine, who suggested the problem. Before I dive into what that project is doing, I'll give you a little bit of a story to tell you what I mean by discovery. So as many of you may know, in World War I, we saw the first uses of chemical warfare, basically. In Europe, the economy, there was a lot of production of cloth and clothing. They needed new dyes for the clothing. And so if you look at the early 1900s, they were experimenting a lot with different chemicals that could be dyes, built up warehouses of those chemicals. And when World War I happened, somebody got the smart notion that some of those chemicals would be good tools for fighting with. And in particular, then you had in 1917, the Allied forces in Ypres, Belgium, found these bombs raining down on them, marked with yellow crosses. Those bombs contained mustard gas, which had been one of the chemicals that was experimented with as a dye. So it was a pretty devastating weapon. Soldiers died of burns, of they were blinded by the blast and the chemicals. They also developed severe respiratory ailments, and a lot of them died from that. But some survived. And after the war, scientists in America who were studying the survivors, who tended to need like a transfusion of blood every single month, made an interesting discovery. So they figured out that what was going on was the mustard gas was attacking the white blood cells in the body and leaving these poor guys very vulnerable to diseases and so on, hence the transfusions every month. So they published their findings, as scientists do, but nobody was that interested in a few guys who'd gotten poisoned by these bombs. It went to a second-tier medical journal and kind of languished. About the same time period, though, people started to know about and understand a disease, a type of cancer that you're all familiar with called leukemia. And again, in the about 1920-ish time frame, they discovered that leukemia was a disease that created too many white blood cells, right? Lots and lots of white blood cells, and those white blood cells would push out, in essence, the red blood cells and the platelets that were carrying the nutrients that the body needed, thereby killing the host. So they published, but in a totally different set of medical journals. 25 years later, someone realized, mustard gas kills white blood cells. Leukemia produces too many white blood cells. Maybe mustard gas could actually be helpful in treating leukemia. They tried it. They did infusions, obviously diluted, et cetera, into patients with leukemia's bodies. This is the first chemotherapy. So this is the invention of chemotherapy. And sure enough, did show that there was potential there. So incredible discovery, but everything we needed to know was available from 1920 on. It should not have had to take until 1945 to figure this out, except that the scientific literature is huge. Scientists are specialists. We specialize in particular silos. Nobody had read both of those papers. So with that as inspiration, what the team I'm working with is trying to do, also looking at cancer, is very similar. It's trying to get the computer to be able to read the medical literature, form a model, at least of what the significant problems for the problem, the significant portions for the problem we're trying to address, and then make hypotheses, make suggestions of where there might be latent discoveries. We chose to try this out on, again, a problem in cancer. It's been well known for 30, 35 years that there's a particular gene in our body, P53. I hope there aren't too many medical researchers in the room. You'll see why in a minute. P53 is often commonly known as the cell's angel of death, right? Why? Because when it's working properly, your cell has a normal life cycle. All cells in your body, they get born, they live a certain while, they die, they're replaced by new cells. except when they don't. If they don't die on schedule, you get a proliferation of cells. And so this P53 not working correctly, not killing off cells at the end of their life, has been found to be responsible for about 50% of all cancers. So it's a pretty important gene. Now, there is a class of proteins called kinases that have been found to help regulate that gene, help it work correctly. And some of them upregulate it and some of them downregulate it. Some of them work for certain people with certain kinds of conditions and biology, and some work for others. So there's been kind of a focus over the last many years on finding kinases, because there's not going to be one killer kinase. You kind of need to know what the right kinases are to use for the different individuals. But finding them in the first place would be good. And this graphic, before the year 2004, the only kinases known were these kinases in green. So these are just all names of proteins, and the green ones just happen to be these really helpful ones that could attack, that are called kinases that attack and help regulate P53. Okay. So our team started feeding the computer the medical literature. We had to teach it biology. Until then, there was not a focus in biology. It's a whole new vocabulary. There's some basic rules you have to learn. So it went to school, basically, learned a little bit about biology, learned a little bit about genomics, fed it what's freely accessible, which are really the abstracts, for about 23 million papers, right, in the medical literature. Asked it to build the model, and then asked it to look for missing links, in essence, things that seemed like they ought to be there but weren't. And we did this by way of a retrospective study. The reason I mentioned 2004 was we were doing this work in 2014, and so we fed it the literature through 2004 and asked it to predict what other kinases might be in there. And what you see in orange are 7 kinases that it found that were unknown before 2004, but were discovered in the years between 2004 and 2014, meaning that the system had actually correctly predicted, after 3 months of work, by the way, including all the setup, et cetera. So it correctly predicted 7 new kinases. We'd been finding kinases at the rate of 1 every year or 2. So to get 7 in one blow, pretty cool. But the computer made a few other predictions. And in particular, it said with very high confidence that those 2 proteins in red up there should be kinases. But nobody had said they were kinases. It was not reported anywhere in the medical literature. So fortunately, we were working with the College of Medicine. They have wet labs. They started doing some lab experiments to see, are these proteins actually kinases? And what we were able to publish in 2015 is that, in fact, they are. The computer had found 2 brand new kinases in that one sweep through. Now, the yellow ones are other ones that it said with lower priority or lower confidence might be kinases. We don't know yet. I mean, it takes a long time to do the biology, the biological experiments to actually prove something out. On the other hand, that's exactly why we want this kind of a system, because it's going to take a year for each of those proteins to do the verification. You only want to go after the ones that might be right. You don't want to be looking through haphazardly or just based on intuition, which was the state of the art before. It's a very cool project. Is it conclusive? Will we be able to make assistance for all branches of science? I don't know. But it was a very nice demonstration and definitely has led to some new science, which is rather exciting for what might be possible. Switch gears entirely. We've been talking a lot about text with Watson and this sort of this scientific assistant. Here's a different kind of assistant technology. In this project that I'll talk about, we want to create an assistant for a radiologist. So radiologists look at thousands of images a day. They can look at 100 for any particular patient for a particular study. And they suffer, as you might expect, from eye strain, and frankly, from what we used to call MIGO, my eyes glaze over, right? Which of course, for a doctor, where his eyes being focused at picking out just exactly those right places in the study that will show him what's going on with this patient, that's a very dangerous problem to have. To make matters worse, in say the 100 pictures that they might get from any one patient, there's probably only going to be 10 or so that will actually show what the doctor needs to see. That is, that will show the abnormality or the thing that is wrong in a way that will help them with the diagnosis. So it's a lot of stuff to look at and a very challenging problem. Now, to add to that, if you're a medical doctor and you're going into radiology, you will end up specializing in just a couple parts of the anatomy, because for any part of the anatomy you're going to look at, you have to learn all different views of that anatomy, because pictures get taken at different angles. You need to learn different modalities, different types of imaging, because again, different types of imaging may show up different problems better or worse. And so there's an enormous amount that you need to know. And frankly, not everywhere on earth are all radiologists as well trained. And so often, in fact, you have to find the right expert who will be able to read the images that were taken. So it seems like an area where a smart computer assistant might be of good help. It's a hard problem for all the reasons I've just told you, but also because of the background knowledge that has to go into it. How you read an image depends a lot on the disease the diseases that can happen to that part of the anatomy, and what other symptoms that the patient might be showing. You'll have lab reports and other testing sort of data coming at you. So in addition to the images, you have to have a pretty well-rounded knowledge of medicine. And our goal with what we're calling the medical sieve then is to take all that information, be able to look at the hundreds of images and boil them down to the 10 that the radiologist needs to see. But if you're going to practice medicine, it better be at a level that's at least as good as the humans are, and the best humans are, because, okay, we know humans make mistakes, but computers are not supposed to, right? So it's a pretty high bar. How can we prove that we can make a good enough medical assistant to be able to help the radiologists? I can't answer that question today. We have some ideas about how to do it, how to be able to compare them to radiologists. We're not there yet, frankly. This work is still pretty much in its infancy. It's about 4 years in. We've been focused on cardiology and breasts, just two very different areas of the anatomy. Had to start somewhere. A lot of diseases that are, you know, again, big killers, breast cancer, and then of course all the different types of heart disease. So that's what we've been focused on. Give you another little sense again of how hard it is. I'll show you just a tiny bit of one of the types of problems that the computer has to be able to deal with. This is a case where the radiologist, the doctors might suspect some blockage somewhere, what they call a stenosis, a gap or a blockage in the arteries. The computer would get some raw images. It will have a reference image or two. From the raw image, it's got to go through a long set of steps to highlight the relevant part of the anatomy, to segment the arteries, to show and look at different features in those arteries. It will have a big database of images that it can learn from, so it can try to learn the variations that are natural, because of course no two of us does the heart look the same, right? My veins will end up, or arteries will be a lot different than yours in general. But they have to be aligned somehow with a reference, and humans do this, and we kind of learn patterns and we know what we're looking for, but the computer has to learn to do that. So they'll go through a step they call registration. Well, they'll try and take the image and basically overlay it on an annotated reference that a doctor has drawn ahead of time. You can see here what it looks like when you just put one image on top of the other. It looks like spaghetti mess. I believe the green is the actual annotated. The green lines are the annotated, and the red is this patient. And then they have to go through a registration process where they try and align the images, and then they can look for real differences in the actual versus the picture. And it's pretty hard probably for you to see, but there's a little gap right here. And that is, in fact, an anomaly in this particular vein. So there's a stent there. Or they need a stent there. Sorry, there's a stenosis. You can tell I'm not an MD. Again, just a taste to show you what you have to go through. Now imagine doing that for all the possible diseases of the heart, all the different types of imaging, all the different types of views, and then carrying that throughout the body. This is going to be probably a 20-year quest. Fortunately, it's not just our researchers that are doing this, but there are medical researchers now in universities all over the world that are trying to make progress on this problem. Switching to a different sort of thing, how about computers that could assist us in our everyday life, in particular that could help us make decisions? As you know, a lot of times there are not right or wrong answers to questions. And we often go through a little argument in our head where we kind of figure out the pros and cons. Today, there isn't a computer program out there that can really help you line up the evidence and figure things out. What if we could do that? So we made the analogy in decision-making, that internal debate. And so whether it's a business problem like should IBM and Apple form a partnership, believe me, there were pros and cons on that one, or it's a decision one of us might make in our private lives, like should I buy a house, rent an apartment, what's the right thing for me to do? There are pros and cons to these points. Today's technologies are not adequate to help us. You could go out and search on the internet, and maybe you'll find some articles that might help you with that decision, or some facts, though you'll have to guide the search a lot. You could try a question-answer system, Q&A system. That they really only deal with right and wrong answers, so they're not really going to be helpful. Try asking it, should I rent a house or buy an apartment? Okay, I said that backwards, but you got it. Buy or rent. You'll probably get garbage. You might get some smart ass who's pre-programmed an answer. If you picked a common enough question, ask Siri a few of those and you'll see what I mean. What we really felt we needed was a new paradigm, a system that, rather than trying to find the right or wrong answer, tried to find the arguments, tried to help you outline the arguments for and against something. So that's something we're working on here. We think if we can do that, we could go from just search engines that bring you back stuff to really research engines that might help all of us as scientists, yes, but might help lawyers prepare their cases, thinking through things, helping client representatives and call centers walk you through the different plans and help you decide what's right for you. There's a lot of practical applications that you could have for this sort of technology. Give you a little feel for why is this hard. Turns out it requires some subtlety of judgment that isn't normal for a computer. So this is the basic structure of an argument, taken sort of from the debate world, but if you think about it, it's kind of natural. You start with a topic. So let's just, for this example, we'll use the sale of violent video games to minors should be banned, right? And against the topic, usually claims will be made, either pro or con. So you can have claims for or against, right? And here a claim might be violent video games increase children's aggression. That's a short segment, but a statement that, you know, you think of a claim as something you might find evidence for or against. And in this case, for example, a piece of evidence as given here is a large-scale meta-analysis examining 130 studies with over 130,000 subjects worldwide concluded that exposure to violent video games causes long-term aggression in players. So that's evidence, it's talking about studies, facts, and it's supporting that claim that it increases aggression. Easy enough, right? Well, not really. I've cheated a little in that typically, if you were a computer or a person and you're off reading to get some background, you don't get cute little sentences that are nicely picked out like this. You get a mess of junk in some Wikipedia article or the New York Times or whatever magazine you're reading on this topic, and we figure out the claims in our heads, but we often aren't consciously doing that. Give you a sense of how hard it is, we're going to play a little game in a minute. This is what our computer program is trying to deal with, though. Its sources of data are 4 million Wikipedia articles, 500 million sentences in those articles. Because these sentences are pretty complex, and depending on how you look at the different clauses and so on, you can get up to 200 possible claims per sentence. Just trust me on that. So you can end up with 100 billion candidates for claims, if you're a computer, right? Of which probably only a few dozen at best have any relevance to what you're really looking for. So figuring out which are the claims and which aren't becomes a little like finding a needle in a haystack, or actually probably quite a bit worse than that, because in fact of the complexity of the sentence structure and so on. So let's try it, okay? I'm going to give you the topic that, as we said, the sale of violent video games to minors should be banned. I'm going to put up possible claims. I want you to just shout out whether it's a claim or not, okay? Just yes or no. Okay, violent video games should not be sold to children. Claim? Oh, come on, you guys can't be that shy. No, because it's just repeating the topic. It's not adding any information. It's subtle, right? Let's try another one. Violent video games are significantly associated with increased aggressive behavior. Yes, okay, good. Yes, and that's a factual claim. It's one you could check with facts, right? You could look for facts or studies or whatever that would support that. How about this one? Doom has been blamed for school shootings. No. It's too specific. It's talking about a single program. That's not really useful in settling the general argument. It might be evidence for some other claim, but it's not in itself a claim. Only children predisposed to aggression are affected by violent video games. No, that's actually ambivalent, because we don't know how many children are predisposed to aggression. It could be a very small percentage, and that wouldn't justify, you know, banning or not banning games, right? Or it could be a huge percentage, and all children are, in which case then you could make a stronger claim. So it's not a really good claim. How about TV shows just mirror the violence that goes on in the real world? We asked about violent video games. What's that got to do with TV? No, not relevant. Okay, video game publishers unethically train children in the use of weapons. I see, I got you all very confused. This one is a claim. It's an opinion, but it's a claim, right? Somebody is making a very strong statement about this, right? It's their opinion. You couldn't find facts to support it. But if you knew that the person with that opinion was, you know, some recognized expert or authority, that might actually sway your decision. That might be interesting for you. And finally, last but not least, video game addiction is excessive or compulsive use that interferes with daily life. I see mixed answers. No, that's actually the definition of what addiction is, right? So it's not really the same. So you can get a sense, right? I mean, you know, you can grade yourselves. I won't grade you, but when I first took this, I got probably 50%. I think I got the 2 claims, but I also got a whole bunch others that I thought were claims and could be valid. So I'm not going to be debating anytime soon, and I'm going to look really carefully at the next decisions I make, that I'm getting my facts and my arguments right. But as you can see, this is a very challenging problem. Now, when you add that together and you say, I really want something that can put all the analysis on the table and can do this, it's only a small piece of the problem. There's some pieces around the front, like topic analysis, and then just going and getting the right articles to look at. There's a lot of work at the back about, okay, now that I've got the claims, how do I find evidence for those claims? What's real evidence? That's actually just as subtle and difficult as claim detection. And then, is that evidence in this claim, is it for the proposition or against the proposition? How do I organize that for you? We want to go further. We'd like to teach the computer to actually debate, really push the limits. And if you want to do that, then you've got to be able to put together speeches and so on. Why do we want to do it? Not just because it's fun and people get into it, but because if the computer can debate with you, it means it can actually work with you in a much more natural way as we would talk to each other, and it can become much more of a partner down the road. So another interesting thing. Oh yeah, and they're very keen. They're really excited about this because there's a whole set of new challenges you can pursue if you can do this kind of work. Now, I've talked a lot about Watson, but one element of Watson that I'm pretty sure you'll care about here that I have not talked about at all is the amount of power that it took even to run this simple little Jeopardy game, right? 10 racks of IBM Power 750 servers, 15 terabytes of RAM, 3,000 cores. I've been educated this morning, so I know that's trivial to y'all here, but it took a lot of electricity. And as we start getting into these applications that I'm talking about here and doing them in real time, that's only going to get worse. So let me give you one example that I think is a little more ambitious. We've been trying with some neuroscientists to simulate brains, right, the human brain. In particular, brain has on the order of 100 billion neurons and 100 trillion synapses, and we just want to simulate a few seconds worth of what goes on there, what happens in a brain. The brain does that in 20 watts of power. That's what each of you is roughly burning as we speak, as you think through what I'm saying. So we had to partner with one of the national labs. So this is work done with Lawrence Livermore National Lab. They have one of the lowest power supercomputers in the world. Took him 8 million watts to use 1.5 million processors with 6.3 billion threads. And that simulation of a few seconds of brain time ran 1,500 times slower than you're capable of doing and burned all that electricity. If we had wanted to do that simulation in real time, we would have needed 12 billion watts, which is enough, I'm told, to power a fairly major city for several hours. So we're not going to be doing that anytime soon. So how are we going to tackle these really big problems? What kinds of low power capabilities can we work towards and work on? That has been the work of some of my colleagues at the Almaden Center, and now with a number of the national labs heavily funded by DARPA, so we're very grateful to the Department of Defense. A lot of universities, lots of national labs involved now. But they were particularly interested in neuroscience, and they started asking the question, could we design a computer that works like the human brain, that can work with that amount of power, that same power range, and maybe work similarly to a brain. And in August 2014, we announced our first reproducible chip to do that. We call it a neurosynaptic chip. It literally is little silicon neurons and connected up by synapses, if you will. This chip has 1 million neurons. It has about 256 million synapses. It's easily composable, so you can actually connect them up into bigger and bigger systems. Or stack them. They can go in any direction because you just connect them up. By themselves, they're not too interesting, but they can be embedded on boards, which have connections to the outside world. And they're very low power, so that as you start to get a human brain-sized collection of them, it will start to approach that 20 watts sort of figure. So you can read about the chip in the August 2014 Science magazine, made the cover of that. I'm not going to tell you a lot about the architecture today. I will say that it's very different than our traditional, what we call the von Neumann computers that deal with all these bits and bytes. And the reason there's brain in the center here is, people talk about the left side of our brain being the logical, fast thinking, computing sort of piece of what we do, and the right being this dreamy place where we get very creative and where we see patterns jump out at us from things and so on, where a lot of our intuition is. So similar way, we don't expect the synaptic chips to be dreamy, but we do think that they will be better at the sort of pattern matching tasks because they will work much more closely to what our brains do. And so they will probably not be replacing anytime soon your supercomputers. So wherever my supercomputer friend went, you don't have to worry, you still have a job for a long time to come. It's just as I can't think faster than the computer, neither will these chips be able to. But they will be, we think, outstanding at pattern matching and doing that at very low power, which means that they could be embedded in sensors. They could be used in all sorts of dangerous places where you really wish you had human eyes and ears and the ability to react really quickly, but not want to send people into. And so there's a lot of potentials. I'll say a little bit more about that in a second. A chip, of course, as all of you know, is not a system. And so there are lots of layers that are going into this, and that where we're really only just beginning. Last summer, so we published in 2014, last summer we gave out our first kits, little boards with one chip, or a few different configurations with multiple chips, and we gave them to whatever it says up there, 7 government contractors, 3 national labs, 8 corporate research centers, and 25 universities to see what people would think up to do with them. We had a reunion recently. They came back, they showed us some very cool demos. I think, as usual, There's a lot of creativity out there, a lot of cool things that can be done with this. I'll show you just, or talk to you just briefly about a couple that came back. Samsung, makers of TVs and smartphones and so on, showed us a really cool demo where they had a little video camera hooked up to the board, which was hooked up to a controller for one of their TV sets. And they showed that if that camera watched a person who might be sitting and watching their TV, they could allow the person to just control the DVR player, DVD player, whatever it was, the machine, control the TV basically with just a few movements of their hand. They taught it 5 movements, which I'll never get totally right. I believe that turns the system off. I believe this ups the volume, that volume down. Something like this is skip ahead, and the opposite is go backwards. And this little chip was able to detect those in real time, change the computer. So, okay, yeah, you can do that with a video camera today, big deal, but this is one chip and it's almost no power. And so now you start thinking about, oh, so if I could put that in a home with an aging relative and have it be aware of what was accepted behavior and what was not, or, you know, just start thinking of your own favorite applications for that. The Air Force Research Laboratory has got a whole bunch of projects going, but they showed us a little demo with document analysis. So they've been taking not one chip, but a 16-chip board or system, and starting to do natural language understanding, extraction, understanding, etc. They have some very cool imagery sorts of things that they want to do. One of the very first applications I've seen of this chip was using it to detect cars and moving vehicles in a space and actually distinguish between people, bikes, and cars. And again, trained very quickly on a small board. And longer term, they're very interested in applying this to cyber problems and some of the security issues we all face. So that brings us sort of to the end of the hour and about the end of our talk. Again, if we look way back in history, I think you could say the great human endeavor in some sense is always to overcome the different limitations of our abilities. We've seen waves of that in overcoming our physical limitations, so that today, you know, we can travel long distances, sea, land, air, we can move huge things that are way beyond our human capabilities and so on. You see it in connectivity from the days of the Pony Express to the days of Twitter and Facebook and instant connectivity everywhere. You don't have to like these particular advances, mind you. You can see it in productivity from the days of those simple computational sort of engines to mass production and huge supercomputers. And what I guess I'm trying to tell you is we're now entering an era where what we're really challenging are the limitations that we've had in dealing with complexity. And as the world gets more and more complicated, it's very cool to know that the systems that we work with and deal with may be advancing in a way that they can be our assistants in conquering these last challenges. I think it'll be a long time before we get Lieutenant Commander Data, though. So, but we'll use him still as a model. So I think that's a good thing, because the challenges we have today are very complicated, they're very interconnected, and we need all the help we can get. And I think together we can tackle those major challenges. So with that, I'd like to close. I'd like to ask you all to think big, and in your work here, know that you are part of tackling all of that, and help's on its way. And I guess I'm supposed to end by thanking ACM again for inviting me and also for providing the Distinguished Speaker program. So, thank you. If there's time and people have questions, I'm happy to answer them. I don't know how you do things here, or try to answer them. No promises.
Thank everybody for coming out, and Dr. Haas, I want to thank you for coming to give us a talk, and we have a good turnout. One of the things the military does is they have a coin, and this is the ERDIC coin given out by our director and the director of the laboratories, and for your presentation and giving us some insight into what the future may be and in the computer science here and computers areas. Would like to give this to you. We
Oh,
do
thank
this
you very much.
by a handshake.
A handshake. I love that. The secret handshake, secret
That's right.
palm transfer.
And kind of the little key thing is, if you run into anybody with that, you got to have it in your pocket or you end up buying the beer.
Oh, boy. I think it's going in my pocket for the day.
If they challenge you. But thank you very much for
Thank
coming.
you.
Appreciate
It was
it.
a pleasure.
It's a pleasure.
Pleasure.
Okay, well, I want to thank everybody for coming. In the consideration of time, Dr. Haas is going to stick around and talk to anybody who has questions. And thank you for coming today, and we sure appreciate your great presentation.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.